Okay, welcome back to my Macbeth video lecture series. I am now beginning Act 2. I actually think I'll be able to get through the whole act in 1 hour because there are only 4 scenes and a couple of the scenes are really short. But it's a critical scene. It's a critical act. It's not the Shakespearean climax act, but a very significant act occurs. Very significant event. Of course, as we know, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, from the end of Act 1, Scene 7, were resolved to kill Duncan. And so we now enter into that actual act of the murder. Enter Banquo and Fleance with a torch before him. What's interesting, I'm going to stop and do a little bit of explanation in advance. What's interesting about this scene is Banquo, even before Duncan is murdered, seems to have a sense of apprehension about what's happening, where he is. He's in his friend's castle, in his friend's home. He should feel safe and secure. He's inside the castle. He's not outside guarding them. And most castles are very well fortified, so the kind of imminent danger he seems to feel is obviously from something within. How goes the night, boy? The moon is down. I have not heard the clock. And she goes down at 12. I take 'tis later, sir. Hold my sword. There's husbandry in heaven. Their candles are all out. Take that too. Take thee that too. A heavy summons lies like lead upon me, and yet I would not sleep. Merciful powers, restrain in me the cursed thoughts that nature gives way to in repose. Enter Macbeth and a servant with a torch. Give me my sword. Who's there? A friend. What, sir? Not yet at rest? The king's abed. He hath been in unusual pleasure, and sent forth great largesse to your offices. This diamond he greets your wife withal by the name of most kind hostess, and shut up in measureless content. Being unprepared, our will became the servant to defect, which else should free have wrought. All's well. I dreamt last night of the 3 weird sisters. To you they have showed some truth. I think not of them. Yet, when we can entreat an hour to serve, we would spend it in some words upon that business, if you would grant the time. At your kindest leisure. If you should cleave to my consent when 'tis, it shall make honor for you. So I lose none in seeking to augment it, but still keep my bosom franchised and allegiance clear. I shall be counselled. Good repose the while. Thanks, sir, the like to you. Exit Banquo and Fleance. Macbeth speaking to the servant. Go, bid thy mistress, when my drink is ready, she strike upon the bell. Get thee to bed. Exit servant. Is this a dagger which I see before me? The handle toward my hand? Come, let me clutch thee. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. Art thou not fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind? A false creation proceeding from the heat oppressed brain. I see thee yet in form as palpable as this which now I draw. Thou marshallest me the way that I was going, and such an instrument I was to use. My mine eyes are made the fools of the other senses, or else worth all the rest. I see thee still, and on the blade, and dungeons, gouts of blood, which was not so before. There is no such thing. It is the bloody business which informs thus to my mind, to mine eyes. Now o'er one half, now o'er the one half world, nature seems dead, and wicked dreams abuse the curtained sleep. Witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offerings, and withered murder, ashamed by his sentinel, the wolf, who howls his watch, thus with his stealthy pace, with Tarquin's ravishing strides towards his design, moves like a ghost. Thou, for sure and firm set earth, hear not my steps, which way they walk, for fear the very stones prate of my whereabouts, and take the present horror from the time which now suits with it. Whiles I threat he lives, words to the heat of deeds, to cold breath gives. A bell rings. I go, and it is done. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell. So as I stated at the beginning, the scene opens with Banquo and his sense of dread, his having dreamt of the witches, his feeling insecure, feeling a sense of danger in his friend's home, his pulling out his sword when he hears a noise in an environment he should be safe. I mean, remember back in Act 1 when they talked about the temple haunting Martlet, and it approves of this place, and everything is usually very copacetic in an environment where the martlet places its nests. And yet, he calls for his sword as soon as he hears someone. Before that, he talks about the fact that he is exhausted and should be able to sleep, but he can't. He can't sleep because of everything that's going on in his mind. Here, unlike Macbeth, he also thinks about what it means for his sons to be king, his prophecy, and that is tempting. But instead of plotting and planning and seeing a way to make it happen, he prays to God. Merciful powers restrain in me the cursed thoughts that nature gives way to in repose. He talks about the king and how he has been in unusual pleasure, what a great time he had at Macbeth's, and he sent forth great larges to your offices. He sends his, could be his gratitude and his respect and honor and his good opinion, and a diamond that he gives to his wife. So as being the innocent flower, looking like the innocent flower, but being the serpent under it, the Macbeths were very successful with the king. However, that's probably not such a difficult thing because he said himself in a previous act, there is no art to know the mind's construction in the face. And he had put an absolute trust in the original Thane of Cawdor, and clearly he's making the same mistake again. After Banquo goes on and on about how the king really enjoyed himself, Macbeth becomes all Mr. Humble. Well, we just couldn't do the job we wanted to. We were unprepared, and we would have done so much more. And Banquo just says, don't worry about it. But then he brings up the fact that he had dreamt about the three weird sisters, and that they have, in fact, proved accurate in one respect of the prophecies. Macbeth is Thane of Cawdor. Macbeth lies, though, again. And we know this isn't true. I mean, he had a whole discussion, 2 discussions with his wife. Who knows how many other times he'd been pondering and, well, then he was pondering and considering it himself in that long soliloquy. All he did was think about them and what they had to say and how he was going to go about getting that to happen. Boy. careful with my drink. It's so hot, and I've got ice in my bubbly water that there's condensation there. So Banquo brings up the witches. Macbeth says, I haven't really given them any thought. But since you brought them up, maybe we can get together when we can entreat an hour to serve. When we have time and get together, we would spend it on some words upon that business, if you grant the time. So yeah, let's get together and for an hour or so and talk about what happened that day. Anytime, buddy. Now Macbeth plays his card. If you shall cleave to my consent when 'tis. He doesn't say when I'm king. If you support me in becoming king. He doesn't say that, but that's more or less what he's saying. If you shall cleave to my consent when 'tis, it shall make honor for you. I will remember you as my friend and the king's friend. Advantageous. Banquo says, I'll lose none in seeking to augment it, but, and here's the rub, but still keep my bosom franchised and allegiance clear. I shall be counseled. Yes, I've no problem listening to you, talking to you, considering supporting you if the time ever came that you should be king. But know this, my allegiance is clear. My allegiance right now is to my current king, not my potential future king, current king. This tells Macbeth that he will not be able to fully depend on Banquo. Banquo is an enemy. Banquo has sealed himself, cemented himself in Macbeth's mind as his enemy. Banquo and Fleance leave. Macbeth sends the servant off because he wants the servant to tell the lady when to give him the signal to go ahead and do the murder. So this is she is to ring a bell when his night drink before bed is ready. So, his nightcap. Go ask my wife to ring the bell when my nightcap is ready, basically. Coming up with an excuse for her to ring the bell to say it's all set. What was she supposed to do? Get Duncan's guards drunk. Make sure that Duncan and the guards were passed out. And when everything is ready in Duncan's chamber, ding, 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 ding. Okay, there it is. Now I go kill him. In the meantime, while he is waiting to do this act, he starts to hallucinate. This is a sign of the insanity. If you recall back from the first act, when Banquo said to Macbeth, have we, were such things as we saw here, or have we bitten on the insane root that takes the reason prisoner? And we talked about how that insane root is hemlock, and anyone who ate it would go insane. And Macbeth has, when he fully committed to murdering Duncan, he took a solid bite down on that hemlock, a solid bite down on the prophecies, and infused himself with the poison of that. And he is starting to hallucinate. He sees before him a handle, and he reaches to grab it, but he can't, because it's an illusion. It's in his mind. It's in his imagination. He goes to clutch it. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. And he's like, you're a fatal vision. Are you not as sensible to touch as you are to sight? What the heck? But then he knows. It's like we always know in the back of our minds, even though we don't want to admit it. And we will deny tooth and nail, but he knows. Or art thou but a dagger of the mind? A dagger in the mind is now wounded. A false creation, proceeding from the heat oppressed brain. The heat oppressed brain, brain fever, i.e., insanity. He still sees it in form as palpable as this which now I draw. What he sees in front of him looks just as real as the dagger he carries at his side. This dagger is doing something now. It's not just hanging in the air in front of him, it's marshalling him. Thou marshallest me. This is an apostrophe. He is speaking to a figure, an imaginary figure. He's speaking to a dagger, his hallucination. Thou marshallest me. He's been doing that. Art thou not? Etc. Right from the beginning, where he has been speaking to this hallucination of his. And of course, he questions, are his eyes being fooled by the, or are his other senses fools of the eyes? The blade now, not only has it gone from stationary to leading him to Duncan's chamber, it is now exposing what will happen with dunging gouts of blood. He knows there's no such thing. He knows that it is the bloody business, that what he is going to do, which informs us to mine eyes. He knows that this is his mind playing games with him. Now, o'er the one-half world, nature seems dead. In Shakespeare's time, to kill a king was an act against God, a very act against nature. It was unnatural. Wicked dreams abuse the curtained sleep. Witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offering. Evil, that which is evil, is now rejoicing over what is about to happen. Withered murder, alarmed by his sentinel, the wolf, is a personification. Murder is about to happen. The wolf is howling. What's important here is Tarquin, with Tarquin's ravishing strides towards his design, moves like a ghost. This is an allusion to a Roman. I think he was a centurion, I'm not sure. Tarquin raped Lucrece, and Shakespeare actually writes a poem about this. And Tarquin's ravishing strides. So this is your textbook, and so this is why you need to go to the notes to the side of the page. Tarquin surprised and overcame the chaste Lucrece while she slept. And of course, that was the theme of Shakespeare's own poem, The Rape of Lucrece. It was a brutal, unacceptable crime. And Macbeth is doing something equally heinous. He is going to overtake Duncan. Now, he's not going to rape Duncan. He's going to murder Duncan. And the reason that it is that heinous is that in the previous act, Act 7, when Macbeth was going through why shouldn't I kill Duncan, his innocence, his worth, his honor, all of that is parallel to Lucrece, who was a chaste woman who had that stolen, destroyed, just like Macbeth is now going to destroy Duncan. Now, in a apostrophe to the very stones that he is walking on, he asks it not to hear his steps. In other words, he's asking for his footfalls to remain silent so that no one hears him. He doesn't want the stones to prate, to talk about what he is doing. In other words, he doesn't want the stones to, he doesn't want his footsteps to be heard. When a person walks, you can usually hear them walking. So he wants to walk silently, so no one hears him as he enters Duncan's chamber. The bell rings, and he ends this scene on a rhyming couplet, which he's going to parallel again when he speaks of another character's death. Hear it not, Duncan, don't hear the bell. that his wife rang to signal him. For it is a knell. A knell is the ringing of the bell, of the church bell at a funeral, so it's the death toll that summons thee to heaven or to hell. It's done. It is, even though he hasn't killed Duncan yet, the deed is done. He's going now to kill Duncan, and Duncan, based on his actions in life and the virtue of his soul, will either go to heaven or go to hell. Based on everything Macbeth said in the previous act, he's off to heaven. Now, this is Lady Macbeth waiting for her husband to kill Duncan. And the tenor of this scene is very, okay, let's go. You've got two very anxious people. And Lady Macbeth begins the scene by explaining why she couldn't kill Duncan herself. Now, this is irony. This is ironic because we know she begged of the underworld spirits who tend on mortal thoughts to unsex her, to take away all of her feminine tendencies, to allow her to commit this heinous crime. She wanted to be filled from the crown to the toe top full of direst cruelty. And yet she is not as unsexed as she would have liked to have been. For as the scene opens, she says, "That which hath made them drunk hath made me bold. What hath quenched them hath given me fire." And she had to drink to begin to go through with this. She had to consume alcohol. She had to get a little on the drunk side in order to do it. She needed liquid courage. And then as soon as she says that, we see that jitteriness. "That which hath made them drunk hath made me bold. What hath quenched them hath given me fire. Hark! Peace!" It was the owl that shrieked the fatal bellman, which gives his sternest good night. He is about it. The doors are opened, and the surfeited grooms do mark their charge with snores. I have drunk their possets. That death and nature do contend about them, whether they live or die. From within, "Who's there? What ho? Oh, lack! I am afraid they have waked, and 'tis not done. The attempt and not the deed confounds us. Hark! I laid their daggers ready, who could not miss them. Had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it." Enter Macbeth with bloody daggers. "My husband, I have done the deed. Didst thou not hear a noise? I heard an owl scream and crickets cry. Did you not speak? When?" Now, I'm saddened that I have to flip from page to page because there would be no pause between "Did you not speak? When?" and, of course, "Now, as I descended. I, hark, who lies in the second chamber, Donalbain." And then there is a slowing and a pause as Macbeth stops and looks at his hands. This is a sorry sight. Snapping Lady Macbeth out of her into her more unsexed, solid woman. A foolish thought to say a sorry sight. There's one did laugh in his sleep, and one cried murder, that they did wake each other. I stood and heard them, but they did say their prayers and address them again to sleep. There are two lodged together. One cried, "God bless us and amend," the other, as they had seen me with these hangman's hands, listening their fear, and I could not say amen when they did say, "God bless us." Consider it not so deeply, but wherefore could I not pronounce amen? I had most need of blessing, and amen stuck in my throat. These deeds must not be thought after these ways, so it will make us mad. Hemlock, the insane root. Methought I heard a voice cry, sleep no more. Macbeth doth murder sleep. The innocent sleep. Innocent, Lucrece, that illusion. Sleep that knits the raveled sleeve of care, the death of each day's life, sore labor's bath, balm of hurt minds, great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast. What do you mean? Still it cried, sleep no more to all the house. Glamis has murdered sleep, and therefore Cawdor shall sleep no more. Macbeth shall sleep no more. This is a prophecy that Macbeth is making. He, in his hallucinations, heard these voices crying out, and he nor his wife will get a good night's sleep from this day forth. Who was it that thus cried? Why, worthy Thane, you do unbend your noble strength to think so brain sickly of things. Brain sickly. Hemlock. They bit, they acted, and now there is the starting to go insane. Go get some water and wash this filthy witness from your hand. I always ask my kids, this is a Catholic school. What is this an allusion to? It's amazing how many don't know. Very few of us read the Bible anymore. Very few of us are aware of stories. One would think you'd know the story of Pontius Pilate, and when I mention his name, most of them do recognize it. Pontius Pilate, over 2,000 years ago, washed his hands clean of Christ's death. But he is still, 2,000 years plus later, bearing the weight of that guilt. You cannot wash the guilt from your hands, and that's what this allusion is alluding to. This is when she notices Macbeth is no longer in his right mind, wasn't even thinking straight, killed Duncan, and walked out of his chamber with the bloody daggers in his hands. The guards' daggers. Why did you bring these daggers from the place? They must lie there. Go, carry them, and smear the sleepy grooms with blood. I'll go no more. I'm afraid to think what I have done. Look on it again. I dare not. It literally has unmanned him. Ironically, in Act 1, do it and you are more the man. But you are not a man if you don't do it. But you will be a man if you do it. And yet, having committed this act has in fact unmanned him. Infirm of purpose. Give me the daggers. The sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. 'Tis the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil. If he do bleed, I'll gild the faces of the grooms withal, for it must seem their guilt. So she's taking control again. In here, this is when the knocking starts. Whence is that knocking? How is it with me when every noise appalls me? What hands are here? Ha! They pluck out mine eyes. Will all great Neptune's oceans wash this blood clean from my hand? No, this my hand will rather the multitudinous seas incardinate, making the green ones red. He's looking at his hands, he's seeing his guilt. Yes, a little water will wash the blood off his hands, but it will not wash the guilt. The guilt, the blood on his hands, any attempt to wash them, hyperbole happening here, will turn numerous seas red from all of the blood. Not literally, figuratively. All of the blood, all of his guilt would paint all of the seas red. Enter Lady Macbeth. My hands are of your color, but are ashamed to wear a heart so white. I hear a knocking at the south entry. Retire we to our chamber. A little water clears us of this deed. How easy it is then. Your constancy hath left you unattended. Once again, the allusion to Pontius Pilate. Wash your hands clean, but you'll never get the guilt washed off. Hark! More knocking. Get on your nightgown, lest all occasion call us and show us to be watchers. Be not lost so poorly in your thoughts. Hemlock. He's losing himself in his thoughts. He's going insane. To know my deed, 'twere best not know myself. Wake Duncan with thy knocking. I would thou couldst. His regret. Scene 3. The only scene with some real humor in it. Comic relief is very important in many a play, especially one like Macbeth. You would have seen comic relief in Romeo and Juliet when Mercutio made fun of the nurse, for example, and when Peter and the musicians were having a battle of the wits. Before that, when Capulet was playing the cot queen, pretending to be the woman of the house. This is it. This is the one piece of comic relief in this play. And it comes right after the murder. And we get to laugh, but it's sardonic. It's dark. It's black humor. And of course, a drunken porter reacts. Here's a knocking indeed. If a man were porter of Hellgate, he should have old turning the key. Knock, knock, knock. Who's there? In the name of Beelzebub. Does that remind you of anything? Knock, knock, knock. Who's there? Blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 who? Blah, 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 blah. I don't remember any of those silly knock, knock jokes, but I think this is where the knock, knock jokes came from. Knock, knock, knock. Who's there in the name of Beelzebub? Here's a farmer that hanged himself on the expectation of plenty. Come in. Have napkins enough about you? Here, you'll sweat for it. Knock, knock, knock. Who's there in the name? Oop, did that one already. Ha, ha, ha. Knock, knock. Who's there in the name of the other devil's name? Faith. Here's an equivocator that could swear in both the scales against either scale, who committed treason enough for God's sake, yet could not equivocate to heaven. No, come in, equivocator. The equivocator is very important. Know this word. To equivocate is to give a half-truth. It is to tell you part of the truth and leave your mind to create the full truth, or what you think is the full truth. And knowing when the person equivocates, they know full well what you're going to think by what you said, and they will be wrong. An equivocator tells you half-truths, leaving you to infer the rest, knowing what you will likely be inferring. And then, when the truth comes out, you can't say to them, you lied. Didn't lie. I told you. It's not my fault you thought it was yada yada instead. This is important for the play and the devil and the equivocator, in that those are the witches. They have equivocated to Macbeth once and will do so again. And later on in the play, he will refer to them as equivocators. Knock, knock, knock. Who's there? Faith, here's an English tailor come hither for stealing out a French hose. Come in, tailor. Here may you roast your goose. Knock, knock. Never quiet. Never quiet. What are you? But this place is too cold for hell. I'll devil porter no further. I had thought to have let in some of all professions that go the primrose way to the everlasting bonfire. Anon, anon. I pray you remember the porter. So there's irony in the porter pretending to be a porter of Hell's Gate, in the sense that he is the porter at the Macbeth's castle where the devil's bidding has been accomplished. And Shakespeare makes a comment on the different kinds of people who end up in hell, and they're just ordinary folk for the most part. You know, your farmer who hoards all of his corn expecting that the next year will be dry and then he can sell everything and make a fortune, but unfortunately for him it was a good year and there was a glut of corn and he had ended up hanging. Another one he brings in is the tailor who cheaps out on the fabric. When you sew something together, my mother sewed a lot, you had a half an inch extra of fabric in order to make a seam. The tailor who cheated did not have a half an inch of extra fabric for the seam, but made the seam far too close to the edge. And so, of course, it ripped very quickly. But the advantage to that was that he got more and more business. Kind of sounds like today. Make it fast, make it cheap, make it break, and don't have a replacement. So they have to go back and buy more. I guess the tailor and the merchandise, all those people in sales and business, doesn't sound like much has changed, does it? So he opens the gate. Was it so late, friend, ere you went to bed, that you do lie so late? Faith, sir, we were caroused until the second cock, and drink, sir, is a great provoker of three things. What three things does drink especially provoke? Marry, sir, nose painting, sleep, and urine. Lechery, sir. It provokes and unprovokes. It provokes the desire, but takes away the performance. Therefore, much drink may be said to be an equivocator with lechery. It makes him, and it mars him. It sets him on, and it takes him off. It persuades him and disheartens him. Makes him stand to, and not stand to. In conclusion, equivocates him in his sleep, and giving him the lie, leaves him. I believe drink gave thee the lie last night. I did, sir, I the very throat on me, but I requited him for his lie, and I think, being too strong for him, though he took up my legs sometimes, yet I made a shift to cast him. Is thy master stirring? Enter Macbeth. Our knocking has awakened him. Here he comes. Good morrow, noble sir. Good morrow, both. Is the king stirring, worthy thane? Not yet. He did command me to call timely on him. I have almost slipped the hour. I'll bring you to him. I know this is a joyful trouble to you, but yet 'tis one. The labor we delight in physic's pain, this is the door. I'll make so bold to call, for 'tis my limited service. Exit Macduff. Goes the king hence today? He does. He did appoint so. The night has been unruly. Where we lay, our chimneys were blown down, and as they say, lamentings heard in the air, strange screams of death, and prophesying with accents terrible of dire combustion and confused events new hatched the woeful time. The obscure bird clamored the livelong night. Some say the earth was feverish and did shake. 'Twas a rough night. My young remembrance cannot parallel a fellow to it. Enter Macduff. Oh, horror, horror, horror! Tongue nor heart cannot conceive nor name thee. What's the matter? Confusion now hath made his masterpiece. Most sacrilegious murder hath broke ope the Lord's anointed temple, and stolen thence the life of the building. What is it you say? The life? Mean you his majesty? Approach the chamber and destroy your sight with a new Gorgon. Do not bid me speak. See, and then speak yourselves. Exit Macbeth and Lennox. Awake, awake! Ring the alarm bell. Murder and treason. Banquo and Donalbain, Malcolm, awake! Shake off this downy sleep, death's counterfeit, and look upon death itself. Up, up, and see the great doom's image. Malcolm, Banquo, as from your graves rise up and walk like sprites to countenance this horror. Ring the bell. Bell rings. Enter Lady Macbeth. What's the business that such a hideous trumpet calls to parley the sleepers of the house? Speak, speak. O gentle lady, 'tis not for you to hear what I can speak. The repetition in a woman's ear would murder as it fell. The dramatic irony is dripping. He's saying this to her, who was begging to be unsexed by those fiends of hell, who planned out, participated in, and framed the murder of Duncan and his guards. Enter Banquo. Oh, Banquo, Banquo, our royal masters murdered. Lady Macbeth. Oh, alas, what? In our house? Too cruel anywhere. Dear Duff, I prithee contradict thyself and say it is not so. Enter Macbeth, Lennox, and Ross. Had I but died an hour before this chance, I had lived a blessed time, for from this instant there's nothing serious in mortality. All is but toys. Renown and grace is dead. The wine of life is drawn, and the mere lees is left this vault to brag of. Enter Malcolm and Donalbain. What is amiss? You are and do not know it. The spring, the head, the fountain of your blood is stopped. The very source of it is stopped. Your royal father's murdered. Oh, by whom? Those of his chamber, as it seemed, had done it. Their hands and faces were all badged with blood. So were their daggers, which unwiped, we found upon their pillows. They stared and were distracted. No man's life was to be trusted with them. Oh, yet I do repent me of my fury that I did kill them. Wherefore did you so? Who can be wise, amazed, temperate, and furious, loyal and neutral in a moment? No man. The expedition of my violent love outran the pause or reason. Here lay Duncan, his silver skin laced with his golden blood, and his gash stabs looked like a breach in nature for ruin's wasteful entrance. There, the murderers, steeped in the colors of their trade, their daggers unmannerly breached with gore, who could refrain that had a heart to love, and in that heart courage to make love's known? Help me, ho! Hence, ho! Look to the lady. Malcolm, and an aside to Donalbain. Why do we hold our tongues that most may claim this argument for ours? Donalbain, in an aside to Malcolm. What should be spoken here, where our fate, hid in an auger hole, may rush and seize us? Let us away, our tears are not yet brewed. Aside to Donalbain, nor our strong sorrow upon the foot of motion. Look to the lady. Exit Lady Macbeth attended. And when we have our naked frailties hid that suffer in exposure, let us meet and question this most bloody piece of work, to know it further. Fears and scruples shake us. In the great hand of God I stand, and thence against the undivulged pretense I fight of treasonous malice. And so do I. So all. Let's briefly put on manly readiness and meet in the hall together. Well contented. Exit all but Malcolm and Donalbain. What will you do? Let's not consort with them. To show an unfelt sorrow is an office which the false man does easy. I'll to England, to Ireland I. Our separated fortune shall keep us both the safer. Where we are, there daggers and men's smiles. The near in blood, the nearer bloody. This murderous shaft that's shot hath not yet lighted, and our safest way is to avoid the aim. Therefore to horse, and let us not be dainty of leave-taking, but shift away. There's warrant in that theft which steals itself when there's no mercy left. Oops. So let's go back to page 1. Uh-oh. I got possibly lost. Important act, important scene, in which we have, as I said, with the porter pretending to be the porter of Hell's Gate, and this in fact being Hell's Gate. And this is now after the humor of the porter and Macduff. We have the finding of Duncan's body. So there's the tension and the killing, and then there's a brief spat of humor, and then there's the discovery of Duncan's body. So let me just move ahead. Page 3, page 4. And Duncan, when Macduff arrives, his first task is to go and wake Duncan, because that was his job. What we have here is Lennox now describing to Macbeth what the night was like. Remember, the murder of a king is an act against God, an act against nature, and the night has been unruly. This is the night when Duncan was murdered. Chimneys were blown down, screams in the air of death, prophecies, etc. The obscure bird, the owl, also a bird of death and night, cried all night long. And a very unnatural event, the earth was feverish and did shake. We know that means an earthquake, but that doesn't change the fact that science was way far behind in those days, and an earthquake was a message from God. It's a lovely example of an understatement. 'Twas a rough night. No shit, Sherlock. My young remembrance cannot parallel a fellow to it. Macduff enters. He's horrified by what he has seen, and Synecdoche, lovely example here. Much of what is said in the next piece, where they talk about Duncan's death, are metaphors and personification and synecdoche. Tongue nor heart can conceive or name what he has seen. Confusion now hath made his masterpiece. Personification. Most sacrilegious murder hath broke ope the Lord's anointed temple, and stole thence the life of the building. Murder has been personified. The temple of the Lord, the building, is the king, and it's the Lord's anointed temple, God's right hand on earth. Macduff sends them into Duncan's chamber to see it for himself, because it is, in this lovely illusion, a gorgon. To look upon gorgon was instant death turned to stone, and that is how horrific Duncan's body is. He then rouses everybody from their sleep, And as I pointed out while I was reading, the dramatic irony of him saying to the lady, I dare not tell you, it is too cruel to say this to a woman. But he tells Banquo straight up, and she, of course, begins the clamoring that she said they will do. They will not think this of us. Macbeth exits from Duncan's chamber, and he is, as she said, we will clamor and wail our grief. He is clamoring and wailing his grief. And here, all is but toys. That sort of metaphor of life is no longer of any value. Got a hair on my face. I can feel it. You can feel these little things, but you can't get rid of them. Wine. The wine of life is drawn. So the king was like a keg of wine, and it has been drawn out, and all that is left of the mere lees. Anyone who's made wine knows what he's talking about. All of the sediment falls to the bottom, and then, of course, you filter the wine, and then you do it again. You let the sediment fall again, and you filter it. It's the dregs, and that's the fact that Duncan is dead. Donalbain and Malcolm enter, and they are informed of their father's death, and they want to know who did it. And, of course, Lennox says, those of his chamber, as it seemed, it appears that the murderers were his guards. It appears their faces were covered in blood and their daggers were. And they acted in such a distracted manner, I felt unsafe. No one was safe with them. Now, Macbeth, he takes full opportunity of this moment of going in. I don't even know if this was part of Lady Macbeth's plans, but he goes in and he kills them. He murders them. And he says, I do repent me of my fury that I did kill them. As well as Banquo being his nemesis, here Macduff sets himself up. Wherefore did you so? Why did you do this? They could have questioned the guards. They could have asked the guards what happened and discovered the truth. Macduff. And I would have my actor, in your mind, you're fermenting suspicion now of Macbeth. And I would have the actor for Macbeth. He knows. He knows. Oh my God. He suspects me. And he starts stumbling out words to try and explain why he did this. And Lady Macbeth comes forward to save the day. She faints and takes everybody's attention off Macbeth onto her. Malcolm and Donalbain have a lovely little conversation. In this little conversation, they're like, why are we silent? We're the ones who feel this the most. But Donalbain reminds him, our fate, hidden in the auger hole, may rush and seize us. We can't talk with these men. Somewhere, hidden away in one of these men, is the determination to kill us. After Lady Macbeth is carried out, the men come together, led by Banquo. So, if Macbeth had any idea that Banquo was not going to side with him, that Banquo was clearly his enemy, this confirms it, because we have to talk about what happened here. Now, he says we have our naked frailties hid, so let's get out of our pajamas and put on proper clothing. And he says, he swears that he is going to hunt down whoever murdered their king. And the great hand of God, I stand, and thence against the undivulged pretense I fight of treasonous malice. And so do I. And then everyone else agrees. And so they determine to meet in the hall. Malcolm and Donalbain have a few words to say again about how they have to get their asses out of there. They have to leave, they have to run, because someone in this crowd wants them dead. Unlike their father, they are not willing to believe what a person claims. To show an unfelt sorrow is an office which the false man does easy. All of these men are expressing their grief, but one of them killed our father. And he says, okay, Malcolm is going to England, Donalbain is going to Ireland, because, if we split up, it'll be harder for them. It'll make life a little safer. And he too says we cannot trust anybody. There are daggers in men's mouths. And because they are the nearest relation to the king, they're the next likeliest target. The murderous shaft that shot hath not yet lighted, and our safest way is to avoid the aim. So we're next. And the only way we're going to avoid being murdered ourselves is if we get out of here now. And so they do. They take off. Which brings us to the last scene of Act 4. And the old man and Ross are sitting together. I always envisioned them around a campfire, and that's very likely because one of the film versions does that, and so that's kind of imprinted in my mind, the idea that they're sitting around a campfire. And of course, then there's Macbeth entering and departing. So, and again, I think it's because and I think it's the Polanski version where he enters on a horse and departs. He never gets off his horse. Very likely the Polanski version has, I've always liked that director's choice. So the old man and Ross are talking about the night. Again, remember Lennox in his short few years, 20 odd years, he's never experienced a storm like this. Well, this is an old man, 70. 70, he says it's 70 years. That's because 70, 20, 40, 60. A 70, 3 times 20, 60, he is 70. He is over 70 years old. That is really old for Shakespeare's day. That is like somebody who is 110 or 105, 98, that sort of thing. I can remember well, 70, I can remember well within the volume of which time I have seen hours dreadful and things strange. But this sore night hath trifled former knowings. This night was the night Duncan was murdered, and the calamity that nature threw up and outrage as a result has been created one of the worst nights, one of the worst storms of nature ever. Ha, good father, thou seest the heavens as troubled with man's act, threatens his bloody stage. By the clock 'tis day, and yet dark night strangles the travelling lamp. Is it night's predominance or the day's shame that darkness doth the face of earth entomb when living light should kiss it? This is another unnatural act. The night was insane, the day is insane because a solar eclipse is occurring. But they don't understand what a solar eclipse is. Like the earthquake, a solar eclipse was a phenomenon that they saw as an act of God, expressing in some way, shape, or form his displeasure with the acts of earth, the acts of man. 'Tis unnatural, even like the deed that's done. The murdering of a king was an unnatural act. Now, here's another unnatural act that occurred. On Tuesday last, a falcon towering in her pride of place was by a mousing owl hawked at and killed. A falcon, a bird of prey, proud and strong, one of the greatest out there. A mousing owl, this weakly, in comparison, bird, also a bird of prey, but going after little mice as opposed to going after baby sheep, for example. So this falcon was hawked at and killed by a mousing owl, an unnatural act. The falcon, symbolic of Duncan, the mousing owl, symbolic of Macbeth, who was the one who hawked at and killed this bird of pride, this great King Duncan, this falcon. and Duncan's horses. Unnatural act number 3. A thing most strange and certain, beauteous and swift, the minions of their race, turned wild in nature, broke their stalls, flung out, contending gainst obedience as they would make war with mankind. 'Tis said they eat each other. They did so to the amazement of my mind that looked upon it. So Lennox points out unnatural acts. The wind's so strong that chimneys are blown down. The sounds of screams and owls hooting in the night, and an earthquake. Between the old man and Ross, we have the mention of the solar eclipse, the mention of the falcon being hawked at and killed by a mousing owl, and then Duncan's horses going insane, killing each other and eating one another. Macbeth enters. How goes the world, sir, now? Why, see you not? Is it known who did this more than bloody deed? Those that Macbeth has slain. Alas the day, what good could they pretend? They were suborned. Malcolm and Donalbain, the king's 2 sons, are stolen away and fled, which puts upon them suspicion of the deed. 'Gainst nature still, thriftless ambition that will raven up thine own lives' means. 'Tis then 'tis most like the sovereignty will fall upon Macbeth. He is already named and gone to Scone to be invested. Where's Duncan's body? Carried to Combe Kill, the sacred storehouse of his predecessors and guardian of their bones. Will you to Scone? No, cousin. I'll to Fife. Well, I will thither. Well, may you see things well done there. Adieu, lest our old robes sit easier than our new. Farewell, father. God's benseans go with you, and with those that would make good of bad, and friends of foes. So let's go back to page 1. I already explained page 1, actually, and all of the unnatural events that occurred. Quick recap. As Lennox had mentioned, he had never seen a night this bad in his youth. The old man, who is over 70, has never seen anything like this. And Ross mentions the solar eclipse. The old man mentions the falcon being hawked at and killed by a mousing owl. Falcon representing Duncan, mousing owl representing Macbeth. And Ross and the old man combined talk about the horses having broken from their stalls and gone insane and started to kill each other, and the old man points out that they ate each other. When Macbeth enters, they want news. And they ask him, so what's it like out there? And he says, what, don't you have eyes? Can't you see what happened? And Ross wants, do you know who did it? Do they know who did it? The men Macbeth killed. Why? Why would they want to do this? This doesn't make sense. Ross is wondering. They were suborned. They were hired. Malcolm and Donalbain, the king's 2 sons, are accused because they fled. Since they ran away, suspicion has been placed on them. Of course, that alone is against nature again, and Ross points out, because a son murdering the father, that's parricide. But this is not just a son murdering a father, so it's against nature. The regicide, because they murdered a king, and now against nature still, because not only did they murder a king, they murdered their own father. We, of course, know this isn't true. A little bit of information is given. Mentions that the throne is probably going to go to Macbeth then, and it has been. They've named him, and he's gone to Scone to be invested. They want to know where Duncan is, and he's been buried in the sacred storehouse of his predecessors, the tomb on Combe Kill, where all of the kings and members of Duncan's family have been interred. Now, this is brief, but politically critical. Ross asks Macduff if he's going to go to Scone. Going to Scone to watch Macbeth be crowned. No, cousin. I'll to Fife. Macduff is the Thane of Fife. So he's going to go home. He is not going to the crowning of Macbeth. That is a very, very clear political statement. I do not approve of you as king, because Macduff is a very important thane in Scotland. All the thanes should be there. Ross decides he's going to go, and Macduff wishes him well. May you see things well done there, which he knows full well won't be, because he is not in favor of Macbeth being king. If he was, he would be going to Scone himself. Here's that theme we saw before. Why do you dress me in borrowed robes? His new clothes hang on him uncomfortably, and now laced our old robes sit easier than our new. The new robe, the new reign of Macbeth. The old robe, Duncan. And the new robes don't fit. Now here, God's Bensians go with you, God bless you, is what he basically says to Ross. But then he makes a reference to what I believe is Macduff. And this is the fair is foul and foul is fair reference again. Began and opened Act 1, and it definitely closes Act 2. God's Bensians go with you, God bless you, and God bless those that would make good of bad and friends of foes. So taking this bad situation and turning it right again, and making friends those who are considered foe or the enemy. Who is the foe currently? The foe is believed to be Malcolm and Donalbain. Not Ross, the old man is hoping that Macduff will in fact be the man who would make good of bad and friends of foes. And this reminds us that Macduff, even more so than Banquo, is Macbeth's nemesis. And I say that even more so than Banquo because I'm used to teaching this play after I've made the kids read it first. I haven't done that with you guys, so I'm not going to explain why I said that. And so that ends my lecture. I suspect I went over an hour. I hope I didn't go too long, because it's going to take forever to download this onto Google Classroom. Alrighty, all of Act 2 in one shot.